Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so grateful that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Amazon Music, Ghana, Himalaya, Podchaser, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is our friend Laurie Wallmark. She is back on the show to celebrate women in STEM, and one woman in particular. Her book is called Codebreaker Spy Hunter, Elizabeth Freedman. Hey, before our guest comes in, we gave a sneak preview of the Solve It for Kids podcast here on Reading with Your Kids, and it was so popular, it's like spun off. It spun off into its own thing. And my buddy, our dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, is here to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this great new podcast. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Jed. Oh, I am so excited about our new podcast. We've been getting some great reviews. Everybody wants to find out what's going on and meet and listen to some of our scientists and engineers. We have done how do you map an underwater forest?
Yeah.
We have done how do you cut a person in half safely, of course.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We have talked about improving your connection with water by going on a water walk, and we have watched Vanessa Brantley Newton create illustrations that come to life.
I took a water walk with my amazing niece. We had such a great time. I didn't fall into the water, but it was really, really fun. And I love the fact that all of our guests are giving our wonderful listeners challenges, really fun challenges that they can do together as a family. And that's so cool. Hey, tell everybody where they can find Solve It for Kids, because it's not on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's its own thing.
So please, if you want to keep listening, go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And you can download all 4 of the first episodes that we have, plus listen to all the new ones we have coming out. You can also find on Stitcher Radio and, of course, through our website, solveitforkids.com.
Jennifer, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me be part of this awesome podcast.
Well, we make a great STEM team, don't you think?
Absolutely. All right, join us over at solveitforkids.com. Joining us on the line right now from the beautiful Garden State of New Jersey. She is back today to celebrate another fantastic woman in the STEM field. Please welcome back to the show our guest, Laurie Wallmark. Laurie, how are you?
Oh, I'm just great, Jed. I am so happy to be back with you again on this podcast to spread the word about women in STEM.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I have my daughter just got engaged to the person who's been her best friend since 4th grade, and he is an engineer. And one of the things that he was sharing with me was that in his college, there was one woman in his electromechanical engineering program. And they're working really hard to reverse, but not to necessarily reverse it, but to fix that, to get to recruit more women into getting into engineering. And I think one of the ways we can do that is just recognizing that, we've had some amazing women doing some great things in STEM and in the STEM fields already.
And I think girls and boys both need to be able to see that. Girls need to be able to see the metaphorical mirror in the book so that they can see themselves reflected. But boys who grow up to be men in the field also need to understand that, oh yes, women can be in this field too. So the books aren't just for girls,
right?
For both girls and boys.
Absolutely, yeah. And you and I have talked about some amazing women. I remember very well our discussion about Hedy Lamarr, and this woman who was famous for being in the movies, and she created these incredible inventions.
Absolutely. No one knew about it for a long time. They thought of her as this glamorous, beautiful movie star, which she was, of course, but she also invented the technology that helps keep our Wi-Fi safe from hacking.
Yeah.
And it goes to show you don't have to choose. You want to be glamorous and dress up and sparkle, more power to you. But you can also be smart.
Yep, absolutely. And today we're talking about a very smart woman. Her name is Elizabeth Freedman. What was Elizabeth Freedman known for?
Okay, so Elizabeth was a code breaker. In World War I and World War II, she broke codes that helped capture spies, capture Nazis. She helped capture rum runners. She broke the Enigma code. We think of Alan Turing as breaking the Enigma code, which he did. But she broke it here in the U.S. And because of wartime secrecy, they didn't know that the other person was working on it. So she broke the unbreakable Enigma code. She also founded the first cryptology department in what is now known as the Central Intelligence Agency. So this was an amazing woman. She did a lot of work. And to me, the thing that was most interesting about her, in addition to her amazing achievements, is as a child, she wasn't interested in science and math. She liked language. She liked English. She majored in English. She was fascinated by Shakespeare. Nothing to do with science and math. Yet she ended up in a field that's heavily pattern recognition mathematical.
And I guess that's the idea of being able to break secret codes always fascinated me because, I was like, well, where do you start? How do you, looking back on the folks who've translated hieroglyphics and everything, when you don't have a starting place, how do you start and figure the stuff out?
I can almost see how you started out when it's a cipher. This letter stands for that letter, this letter. But when you get into what are called codes, where it's words, and a word means something else. One of the codes she broke was written by, the person was called the Doll Lady, because she sold dolls, but she also sold secrets to the Nazis. So she would be sending letters saying, 3 dolls of this type and 4 dolls of that type, and how do you get from that to understanding that it meant warships? I mean, that to me is truly amazing.
Yeah. It really is. And I guess that's such a challenge, and it's so much fun to imagine that there are people out there who are able not only able to come up with these codes, but able to break them and to see into them.
Oh, absolutely. And she was doing this work before computers. She was doing this by hand. She was looking at the patterns. She was seeing things. I mean, some things are easy. We know that the letter E is the most common letter in the English language. So you look around and the most common letter you see, it might be a Q in the code, is probably an E. I think after that is T, so you work your way there. So that I can sort of see with just simple codes. They're called simple Caesar ciphers. And in the book, in the back, I have an explanation of how you can crack the code, how you can write a Caesar cipher, how you can send it to your friends, how they can decipher it. But when you get to something like the Enigma machine, which for every letter it put out, it changed the code. So how do you, so you don't have a majority of, in my example, Q's. You have some Q's, you have some V's, you have some W's, and they all represent the letter E. I mean, it's just a special type of brain that can see that. And she had that brain.
That's interesting that you're saying that. We talk a lot here on the podcast about folks who are neurodiverse and that they think differently. And oftentimes in our conversations here on the show, it's been talking about folks who fall somewhere in the autism spectrum. But I think it's also, and I think sometimes we think of that as a challenge. But there are a lot of folks who think differently than us that are neurodiverse, and that's a real benefit to them and helps them do incredible things.
Oh, absolutely. Some kids on the autism spectrum have an amazing ability to focus. Mm-hmm. The rest of us are like, oh, look, there's a squirrel. But they can sit there. I'm facing a window, and there happens to be a squirrel out the window. So what I said is an actual fact. Mm-hmm. But there's some kids who could be sitting here doing something on the computer. They'd never notice the squirrel because they're so focused. And that can be a positive. So you're right. The neurodiversity of all of us, some are strengths, some make it a little bit harder in our less neurodiverse world. Mm-hmm. But some of them, you end up with people like Elizabeth Freedman, who had this unknown ability. How would she know that she was going to be a good code breaker? And the way she got into it was interesting too.
That's one of the things I was going to ask you. How did she get into code breaking?
Okay, so she graduated with an English degree. She was a school principal for a year, but she wanted to find something else. She wanted to do research having to do with language and English. She went to Chicago to find a job, and in Chicago there was a library that had a Shakespeare folio. And as I mentioned, she was really interested in Shakespeare, so she really wanted to go see that folio. And she did. She looked at it. She talked to the librarian, happened to mention she was looking for a job. And the librarian said, funny you should say that. There's a man, and I am blanking for the moment on what his name is right now. It'll come to me, who is looking for a research assistant because he wants to prove that Shakespeare's plays were written by Francis Bacon. Ah. Right? So off she goes to take this job to prove that the plays were written by Francis Bacon. How do you prove that? You look at patterns in the plays. You look at the way things are written. Well, she didn't prove that because, as far as we know, it's not true. Mm-hmm. But it definitely got her interested in codes and patterns and how things go together. So when the man whose name I still can't remember, I remember it was Riverbank Laboratories. World War I came about, mm-hmm. and he wanted to form a code-breaking unit for the military, and he hired her and the person who at that time then became her husband, or maybe already was her husband, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. So the two of them started the Riverbank code-breaking unit, and the Army was sending all the codes to them to break. Wow. Right? So neither of them had training in it because it wasn't a science yet. Mm-hmm. It really wasn't. You just sort of, well, let's try this, let's try that. Yeah. But they helped make it a science.
That's incredible. Now, you mentioned the Enigma machine a couple of times, and you talked a little bit about what that was, but can you tell us a little bit more about what this machine was and what it did?
Sure. In a simple, what I'm calling a Caesar cipher, because that's what it's called, one letter substitutes for another. Mm-hmm. So in my example, you can count the number of E's, the number of a certain letter, and assume that that's an E. Mm-hmm. But what the Enigma did is for each letter, it had a different code. So the first letter of your message would use code A. The second letter of your message would use code B. So you couldn't just count the letters because if your message had 100 different letters in it, it was 100 different codes.
Wow.
Now, the way she broke it is you set the codes on the Enigma machine. You set a start point, and then it just, the gears move and, things go around, and it goes from this code to that code to the other code. But you need to change that first starting code. And as I say in the book, I think I said it this way, a lazy operator didn't change that first code. So as time went on, she got more and more messages that had the same first code, right? So from there, she could figure out that. She could figure out the second code because it was always the same sequence of codes. So if that person hadn't made the mistake, she might not have been able to break it. She might have been able to. I mean, she was a genius. But it certainly helped that he made a mistake. She got enough messages that she could look at, all the first letters, all the second letters, all the third letters, and figure it out from there.
Wow. And we're talking about the fact that she broke this code, but in breaking the code, she saved thousands of lives. It's easy to say. Absolutely.
Later on, she broke a code that the head of the FBI wanted to say, hey, we broke this code. Well, the FBI didn't break it. She and her group broke it, but neither here nor there. She didn't want him to say anything because if the enemy didn't know that we broke the code, they'd keep sending messages. But he wanted the glory. This was J. Edgar Hoover. He wanted the glory of saying, hey, we broke it. Well, once they know it's broken, they switch codes. They're not stupid.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I really hope kids understand is, I know for myself when I was younger, there are some things in science that in technology that fascinated me, but I was really focused on helping people. And I wanted to go out and work with people and help them have better lives. And I never made the connection between how my interest in science and technology could actually help people's lives. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't realize. And I'm hoping that if kids realize that, then those kids who have huge hearts and lots of empathy will start looking at the sciences and the STEM fields in a different way.
Well, and interestingly enough, after the book was accepted for publication, going through editing, the marketing people came back and said, we want you to add some back matter about cryptography today, right? Because I was talking about before computers and things like that. And so in looking more into that, talking about helping people, you don't think about how much cryptography helps us. It keeps our transactions safe over the internet, keeps us, people from stealing our identity, from pretending to be us with medical things, getting our medical information. So, this is hardcore math and science, cryptography, helping people in a way that you don't even think about because it's sort of behind the scenes. We just get on a website and we don't really think about the fact. We send an email. We don't think about the fact. And yes, of course, we've all heard now about the hacks. They do happen, but it would be total chaos without cryptography.
Yeah, and we use technology and we're not aware of it, and we don't appreciate it, and we don't. I never think, unless I force myself, I never think about the team of peoples that need to work together to make our conversation happen right now. We're looking at each other. You're in New Jersey, I'm in Boston. We're hundreds of miles away from each other, yet still we're looking at each other. There's no lag in our conversation. And at the same time, I'm using a computer to record this. And that all happens because folks came together to work as teams.
Well, certainly this past year, without a doubt, you've got technology that all came together so we could do this. You've got medical teams that came together to work on the vaccine. It's just amazing how much people, equipment makers, to make ventilators cheaper so that more people could get ventilators, so that they could work better. Researchers to look at the data to figure out what's the best way to treat people. You're right. It's not a lone wolf out there sitting, I'm going to do it this way. Mm-hmm. Science and math is teamwork, without a doubt.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm wondering, what was it that inspires you to go out and rediscover these amazing women in the STEM fields?
Okay, so I may have said this to you before, but what the heck, I'll say it again. 2 things. 1, I love science and math. I have since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I thought I'd actually grow up to be a mathematician. Mm-hmm. It didn't turn out that way. My undergraduate major was in biochemistry, and then I got a master's in information systems, which is computers. And a lot of my professional life was as a computer scientist, either acting as one or as a computer science professor. So that's one side of the equation. I love math and science. I want to share that love with kids because I know that some kids are afraid of it. They haven't been exposed to it. They haven't seen the fun side of it. They're afraid they might make a mistake. The other side of it is I want to showcase people who are underrepresented in math and science, like women. Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, there were no books about women scientists except Marie Curie. You know, that was it. So I want to show that this is not an unusual thing to have women in math and science, and it's not new. Mm-hmm. It's been going on all along. We just hadn't heard about it. So I want to, these unsung heroes, if you will, of math and science, I want to sing them, sing their praises.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Codebreaker Spy Hunter, Elizabeth Freedman, and our guest has been the author, Laurie Wallmark. Laurie, thanks so much for being back on the show.
Oh, it is always a pleasure chatting with you, Jed. Thanks for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Yulia Pankratova. Our friend from the United Kingdom is back to celebrate a brand new book, The Chameleon's True Colors. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We want to encourage you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Parents Click Here button. Even if you're an author, click on the Parents Click Here button, please, and scroll on down to where it says Live Events, because we want to invite you to check out our wonderful virtual presentation of The Magic Between Us is Respect and Kindness. We can't wait till we get a chance to travel the country again, presenting my educational magic show live and in person and totally interactive. But until then, we can bring some magic to your community no matter where you are in the world through the magic of technology. And The Magic Between Us is Respect and Kindness is a beautiful program that encourages kids to be respectful, to be kind, and to read. It really is wonderful, and I would love to have a chance to share this with your community. Now, you don't have to be the principal of a school. That's typically who are inviting me in to perform for kids. If you're the den mother of a Cub Scout group, if you're part of a homeschooling network, if you are a librarian, a youth pastor, if you know your kid's teacher and they're frustrated and they need something to brighten the lives of the kids in your kid's classroom, well, invite them to check out The Magic Between Us is Respect and Kindness. We would love to bring a smile to your community. You can get all the information about that program at our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guest, Laurie Wallmark. Be sure to check out Codebreaker Spy Hunter and find out all about Elizabeth Freedman. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, our amazing interns, Hannah Pat Opoyski, Alexia Brown. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for helping your child understand that there are no limits to their future, that they can do amazing things. And thank you so very much for helping make the world a better place for all of us by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.